Like I was saying, today is a continuation of the data migration service that we were talking about a couple of weeks back. Now, this is another component of AWS that we are going to see. So this is the agenda for today's session. So we'll have a quick recap of the different AWS concepts that we have seen until now, including the first half of the DMS. And then there is a little bit to talk about the mechanism of DMS, how that works in the background and so on. Post which I'll also show you, I'll also give you a walkthrough of the AWS platform. So I signed up for an account on AWS, and I'll show you what the interface looks like, how the different components look like, and how you can possibly use this data migration service on the platform. Okay. So just a quick recap. So apart from last week's session, before that we covered this basic concept of AWS, and then the other different components of AWS, just the EC2, which is the virtual machine, and then the S3, which is like the data lake used for storage of large object files, and then Aurora, which is a database of AWS, DynamoDB, another NoSQL database, and then Redshift, a relation database, SageMaker and DMR, which are the analytics components of AWS. So we saw about these different components, and then we went into a brief overview of the data migration service, that is the DMS. So we said it is a web service to migrate databases to AWS quickly and securely. We talked about two different types of migrations, homogeneous and heterogeneous, and then details regarding the payments and certain conditions, and certain technical details also we discussed, and then we also discussed about this fail-safe feature that it provides. So in case of any interruption, it automatically restarts the process and continues the migration from where it stopped. And we also talked about a few use cases where DMS is typically used. So migration, development and testing, database consolidation, data replication. And this is where we stopped during our KKSS session on DMS a couple of weeks back. Now, just to continue from, any questions here until now on DMS or on any of the other AWS components? Okay, so let me move on. So we talked about these two different types of migration that the DMS service offers. So first one is the homogeneous migration, and the next one is the heterogeneous migration. Now, homogeneous is where both of your source database as well as your target database are of the same software. So you migrate from Oracle to Oracle or MySQL to MySQL. So that is what you call as a homogeneous migration. The only difference is that you typically migrate from an on-premises platform to a cloud platform, or vice versa. So the only condition for you to use AWS is that one of your endpoints, that is either the source or the target or both of them, at least one of them, should be hosted on the AWS platform. So you can either take data out of AWS and put it on your local database, or you can take data from your local database and put it on the AWS cloud database. And when these two databases are of the same type, then you call it a homogeneous migration. And the DMS is the platform which facilitates this migration from on-premises to cloud or vice versa. The heterogeneous migration is where you migrate data from one database to a target database of a different type. So the example here is that you migrate from an Oracle system to an Amazon Aurora. But here the difference from the homogeneous migration is that there is an additional step that is involved. You use something called as the AWS Schema Conversion Tool, or SCT for short. So the purpose of using this schema conversion tool is, the Oracle is it's a database management system which is provided by a different vendor, and Amazon Aurora is provided by a different vendor, right? So each of these software has its own configuration, has its own formatting and so on. Okay, so in order to convert the Oracle into a format that is compatible with Amazon Aurora, you use this AWS Schema Conversion tool. Okay, So whenever you're doing any heterogeneous migration on AWS, that is, whenever you're migrating data between two different types of databases on AWS, you have to use this AWS schema conversion tool to ensure that the format or the compatibility stays when you do that migration. Okay, so that is the difference. One additional step that is involved when you are doing the heterogeneous migration as compared to the homogeneous migration. So what is the internal mechanism of this migration process? This is how it happens. So when you initiate this process of data migration on DMS, what happens is the DMS platform connects to the source data source, and then it formats the data for consumption. So any schema changes, any data type changes, or any other structural changes to that data or to those tables, so that process happens over here. And once that process completes, it loads this data to the target data store. So that is the process that happens internally. But in order for us to initiate this internal process, what should we do with the AWS user interface? This is what we do. So you log on to, so I'll be showing you that process in a minute. But what you actually do is you log on to the AWS platform, and then you go to the DMS option. And then the first step that you need to do is you create something called as a replication server. Okay. And then second step is to create source and target endpoints with connection information. So source is nothing but you're saying, hey, okay, I'm migrating data from my Oracle database, and my target database will be the Amazon Aurora database. So you'll enter all the connection information. So what is the IP address of that source? What is the IP address of that target? What are the other details? For example, any passwords or other user authentication details, anything, any details that are required, you enter all those details. That is the second step. Third step is to create one or more migration tasks to migrate the data. Okay. And what happens in these tasks? So first thing is that it loads the existing data fully. That is, the AWS loads that existing data fully, and any changes to that data, any updates to the data, it applies. And then there's a process of replication. So replication is where we said there is something called as this availability zone concept, right? So you can replicate data across multiple availability zones, so that even if the data in one zone goes down, or if the data center in one zone goes down, you still have a backup. So that is the purpose of the replication. So this is what happens in the migration process. So there is an internal process where it connects to the data source and formats the data and loads the data to the target. But from our point of view, in the user interface, we create the replication server, we create the source and target endpoints, and then we create the migration tasks. And then you configure this migration task to run as scheduled, so that your database migration happens according to your plan, and all of your data has been migrated from the source to the target. Any questions here until now? Okay. So certain other points here on the DMS. So the first step that I said, right, in the migration process is to create the replication server. Okay. So this replication server is nothing but it's an EC2 instance that hosts the tasks. Okay. So this is nothing but EC2, I told it was a virtual machine or a virtual server kind of thing, right? So whatever migration task you create, that is hosted on this EC2 instance. Okay. And it has this multi availability zone deployment option. And the base storage is either 50 GB or 100 GB, but it can be increased. So these are options that the DMS platform gives you. And regarding the licensing on the EC2, so EC2 is nothing but a virtual machine, right? So virtual machine, so I think if you have so I think some of you might have worked on it here. So it typically runs on Windows or Linux or any other operating system. Okay. So what AWS does is it provides two options. You can either run the virtual machine with the license that Amazon provides, which will incur an additional fees on your part. So you'll have to pay additional fees for that license. So for example, if you use the EC2 server with Windows Server, then you'll have to pay that fees for the Windows Server. Okay. Or the other option for you is BYOL, which is short for bring your own license. So if you already have a license for Windows Server, then you can use that license on your EC2 platform. Okay, so that is a bit on licensing. And then you have something called as an endpoint, which is, so I was talking about two types of endpoints, right? Source endpoint and the target endpoint. So these endpoints are nothing but components created by AWS to access the source or target data store. Okay. And so these are certain parameters that you have to give when you create an endpoint. So you specify whether the endpoint is a source or target, and then what's the type of database engine, whether it's an Oracle or PostgreSQL or MySQL or whatever, and server name or IP address that the DMS platform connects to, and port number. So typically any database that you set up, so for example, even if you set up a database on your MySQL, right? So these are certain parameters that you might have to give, server name, port number, and so on. Okay. And if you wish to encrypt your data, then you use either you typically use the SSL, short for Secure Socket Layer, or if there is any other type of encryption service available, you can use that. And then of course the credential, that is the username and password for you to access the database. Okay. So now let me just show you a demo of the AWS platform. Just give me a moment. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is what you, so you just Google AWS and then this is the page that you have to go to, aws.amazon.com, and you will, for the first time, you will have to sign up for an account here, which I have already done. So once you sign up for an account, what you need to do is you need to sign in to something called as the console. Okay, so I'm just clicking here where it says sign into the console, and you can specify what type of user you are. So since I created the account, I'm specifying this option of root user. So this is basically the account owner that performs tasks requiring unrestricted access. Okay. But on the other hand, if you are part of an organization and if someone else has created an account for you, then you could possibly be an IAM user. So this is IAM is short for Identity and Access Management. So this is a user within an account that performs daily tasks. Okay. So since I have created my account myself, so I'm specifying this option of root user, and I'm giving my email ID. Next, this is captcha that you have to type. So this is how the AWS interface looks like once you log in. So you go to this page called, or you're taken to this page called as the AWS Management Console. Okay, and top left you have something called as services, which is nothing but a list of all the services offered by the AWS Cloud Platform. Okay, so they've been categorized into the several buckets, so compute, container storage, robotics developer tools, machine learning, cost management, and so on. So you can see that there's a huge list of services. So out of all these services, we have in our KKSS sessions, we have looked into only those services which could possibly be more relevant to us. Okay, and here if you see, there's a search bar where you can search for services or any other features, and then here you have the account number, and then certain other details over here. And here if you see, you can specify which server you are connecting to. So I was talking about different servers in different regions, right? So you can see that Amazon has these data centers worldwide in different places in different continents. So multiple availability zones. So this is what that means. So you can have your data hosted in, let's say, US East server, and then you can have a replica of the data let's say in some other server in the Asia Pacific region. So that way, so imagine if a hurricane hits the US, right? You will still have a backup of your data in the Asia Pacific region. So that is, so this is where you choose those options. You can choose to connect to servers in different regions of the world. And then you have something like a dashboard. So this gives you shortcuts of different services that you can go to and so on. Now let me just go, and you also have documentation on different components of AWS. If you want to learn more, and if you want to see how that works and so on, you can click on any of the links here. So let me just first take you to the database migration service, or the DMS. So I'm clicking on services, and then you scroll down from the top over here. You have a category that says migration and transfer. So here you have this database migration service. So I'm clicking over here. So on the left you have several options pertaining to the DMS platform. So you have a dashboard first. So how many tasks you have, how many of them have thrown an error, how many of them have failed, no load complete, and so on. Okay, and how many resources are you consuming? So how many tasks totally, and how many replication instances or replication servers you have created, how many endpoints you have, and so on. So there are maximum 4 tasks over here. And so if we are to configure this DMS to perform a migration activity, so I was talking about 3 stages, right? So first you have to create a replication instance, and then you have to create the endpoints, and then you have to set up the task. So first step, what you do is you go to this option called as replication instances. So this will list down all the instances that you have created, or all the virtual servers that you have created. Okay, so right now you see I have not created anything. So if you want to create a new instance, what you do is you click on this option that says create replication instance. Now I cannot create a replication instance and actually show you, because everything here is charged by the hour. So I will just take you through the user interface and how it looks like. It is largely it is user friendly. The options are pretty straightforward. So just take a look, and for the time being we can just be aware of the different features that the platform offers, how it looks like, what is the user flow, and so on. Okay, but we can't exactly create a virtual server or a database for that matter, because it comes at a charge. Okay. So you specify a name for your instance, and then there's an optional parameter called as the Amazon resource name, and then you type a description, and then you specify what is the amount of RAM or the memory that instance can take. So if you choose 2 virtual CPUs, then you consume 4 GBs of memory, or you can just scale this up to 4 GB, 8 GB, and so on. So there's 32 GB, 72 GB. So for as many resources or as much memory as you consume, you have to pay for that accordingly. So if you want to know about the pricing details, you can click over here. So here you see they'll have a table where so for each type of server that you take, what is the price per hour. Okay, and you can see that it starts from $0.018 and it goes as high as $7 or $10 or $14 per hour, and so on. Okay, so you choose that over here, and then you choose the engine version, how much storage are you allocating, virtual private cloud, that multiple availability zone, and so on. Okay, certain other configurations over here. And then so this is the first step where you create the replication instance, and then second step is to create the endpoints over here. Same, you click on this option, click create endpoint, you select whether it's a source or target. So first, if you want to create that source endpoint, you have to click here, specify all the details in this, fill up these fields over here, and then you click create endpoint. And so similarly, you create one more endpoint, you choose the target endpoint, and then here you can choose the engine basically. So S3 or MongoDB, SQL Server, or whatever, and then you click create endpoint. Okay, so this is the second step. And then third step is to create the database migration task. So here also you click here, and then you click create task, and then task and fair replication instance. What is this source endpoint, target endpoint, all those details you have to give. Certain other parameters also you have to configure, and then you click create task. Okay. So once you do this, you can go to your dashboard. So it will have all the tasks and everything that you created. You can click here, view all database migration tasks, and then you can run those tasks to perform your database migration activities. Okay. So this is on the DMS. Similarly, if you want to access the other services of AWS, you can click here. So for example, if you want to look at S3, right? So you click here where it says S3, and you can specify, you can create access points, you can create those buckets. So buckets is nothing but a folder in S3. Okay. So you can specify all your parameters over here, and then there is also a billing dashboard that shows you how much money you have incurred while using the AWS platform. Okay. So right now, since we have not created any server or anything, we are still at ₹0, but as and when you create those servers and create those databases and so on, based on your consumption, your costs are shown over here. So that's a quick overview of the AWS platform and the user interface. So we have a couple of minutes, I think, before we have a hard stop at 10 a.m. So does anyone have any questions? Okay, so I think if that's it, then we can close for the day.